Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it might be, everybody. Brian Neubert here from GoldandBlack.com. That is Tom Dienhart. Our normal fearless leader is Alan Karpic. He is unavoidably detained in Las Vegas. As I understand it, his friends lost him on the roof of the Caesars Palace. I'm now being told that was the hangover. Anyway, Alan is not here. It is me and Tom. So God help us all here. This is brought to you. This is our GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. It is brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Union Club Hotel, home of the Boiler Up Bar and the 811 Bistro. If I didn't live in West Lafayette, I would be staying at the Purdue Union Club Hotel probably several times a week. It is that nice. It is really nice. So when you plan your next trip to campus, be sure to keep them in mind. Tom, let's get right to it here. I wanted to kind of let you carry the first part of this in terms of some off-season football stuff. So Marvin Grant entered the transfer portal, as we talked about last week. That's been discussed. Mm-hmm. Who replaces him?
I think Chris Jefferson is going to be the guy who steps in for Marvin Grant, plays alongside Cam Allen. Of course, Cam Allen's a returning starter, should be one of the better players on this Purdue defense in the fall. So I think the staff does feel confident in Chris Jefferson, Brian. Of course, Jefferson came in last year about this time as a transfer from Division II Findlay University in Ohio. And not the biggest guy, but a cerebral guy, a smart guy. Pretty much was the nickelback last year. And again, I think he's more than capable of taking Grant's spot. Now, he's not as physical, obviously, as Marvin Grant, but I do think again, he's a little savvier and maybe a little bit better in coverage too. Other safeties, Sanusi Kane, Jeff Brohm said had hip surgery right after spring ball, was not going to be ready in August, but that's a guy I think eventually that's going to play a larger role at safety for Purdue as well. And even Bryce Hampton, Brian, I'm told Bryce Hampton, who just got here this spring, a transfer from Adams State.
Not Adams College, Adams State.
I wish Adams College, believe me. I certainly hope the viewers caught that reference. Please. One of the all-time great movies. But anyway, Bryce Hampton is going to be a guy they're going to use at safety too. So I think there's plenty of able bodies to step in for Marvin Grant since he's a skedaddled to who knows where. We know he's visited Kansas. I'm sure he's got some other stops on his little tour de force here.
For those who didn't get it, Revenge of the Nerds. Tom, I always kind of viewed Marvin Grant as sort of like that extra linebacker, the guy who was maybe a little bit better in the box. I always viewed Chris Jefferson as more of that kind of nickelback, that kind of extra free safety, extra corner guy. Is it fair to think Purdue maybe is a little bit better in coverage, but maybe not as good against the run with the Chris Jefferson for Marvin Grant trade-off?
Yeah, without a doubt. That's a good point. And also, David Elson made this clear, talking to Ron English in the spring, made it clear. Jalen Graham, Brian, is really going to play more of a safety spot this year. Now, with the way I understand it, it's going to be really almost a safety / linebacker. They want to keep Marvin Grant on the field. They want to keep Jalen Graham on the field.
Too late for that.
Yeah. But Jalen Graham, if they're playing a spread offense, Jalen's going to be more of a safety. If they're playing more of a physical offense like a Wisconsin, he's going to be more of a linebacker. We saw that in the spring. Ben Cryle was the guy who was really his backup. So they got Marvin. He's always going to be on. They have Jalen on the field to obviously help him with the run as well. So, yeah, I think, they're going to lose some of that run support physicality from Marvin Grant. But again, between Jalen Graham, Chris Jefferson, even Bryce Hampton and others, I think the Purdue secondary can absorb the loss. I'm
going to deviate a little bit from our finely crafted and exhaustively thought out itinerary for this podcast and jump right to the transfer portal and what it means for Purdue football. Marcus Washington, we believe, was going to visit this week, might be at Purdue now, for all we know. Wide receiver from Texas. Tom, can you tell us about him? And can you tell us about the wide receiver position in general, where Obviously, Purdue's lost David Bell. Milton Wright's situation is kind of up in the air. You have a lot of guys coming back from injuries too, guys who've had a really hard time staying healthy, or when they've not been healthy, they still dominate the Music City Bowl. So Purdue's in kind of a weird spot at receiver, aren't they?
Yeah, they've like you said, they had several key guys miss this spring because of injury. Brock Thompson and his knees, TJ Sheffield hurt that ankle in the Music City Bowl. Abdul Rahman Yassin hurt a knee during practice, and Mershawn Rice had a foot injury. So they were all out in the spring, supposed to be back, ready to go, probably as we speak right now. I used to see him on the field after practice a lot of times, just catching passes. And I'm sure as we get deep into summer here, June and July, they'll get more activity among that foursome, which is going to have to be big, Brian, because maybe we'll get on this a little bit later. I don't want to supersede your very detailed rundown there, but Milton Wright, his status is perilous. We all know it's well documented. It's been on the boards. We've discussed it. He's got an academic hill to climb, and it seems to be a steep hill. It's a hill that we're not going to know if he reaches the top until probably August. So the verdict looms, but geez, Brian, every indication I seem to get is that it may be a real long shot to have number 0 on the field this year. Of course, he was going to be the alpha with David Bell gone. Would be a blow. So we talked about the other 4 guys coming off injury. They're going to play big roles. Remember Tyrone Tracy too, Brian. The Iowa transfer. I think he's going to start. I'm also told that to expect Tyrone to play upwards of 50% maybe of his snaps in the backfield in some way, shape, or form as a ball carrier. And they're looking in the portal. You talked about the kid from Texas. Wasn't overly productive in Austin. He's from St. Louis, played at a school called Trinity, which doesn't even exist anymore, but it was one of these super, super small Catholic schools, became a super football power. Their head coach went on to get a job at Illinois, working with Brett Bielema. Just kind of, they would grab these guys, and Corey Patterson was his name. And anyway, they really stacked their roster and got real good fast. That's where this kid played high school football. He was a 4-star according to Rivals. He's got some talent. Never played a real big role for the Longhorns. I guess just looking for another opportunity. I think, Brian, if he should come to Purdue, I don't expect him to maybe necessarily be the number 1 guy. Mm-hmm. I still think, obviously, if Wright's back, he's the guy. If Wright's not back, I think Brock Thompson's your number 1 guy. But anyway, this kid could obviously give you more depth and just another weapon for Aiden O'Connell to throw to.
I think you do need that depth, right? Because if you don't have Milton Wright, when you look at a lot of the talent Purdue's brought in at wide receiver, bringing in the talent hasn't been an issue whatsoever. But a lot of those guys have been really kind of snake bitten by injury. Mershawn Rice obviously is one of the hardest luck players I think we've seen at Purdue over the years. Abdur Rahman Yassin obviously played through the knee injury all year long. Do you feel like Purdue's confident in those guys, all those promising sophomores' ability to be out there and have the sorts of careers they might be capable of?
I do. I know they really like Yassin a lot. He was a pretty big recruit out of Michigan, as you recall, was committed to Northwestern. And Jamarcus Shepard and company got him to flip to Purdue. They like him a lot. Mershawn Rice was a 4-star for what that's worth, but he was a 4-star coming out of, I think, Reynoldsburg, Ohio. And we know about Brock Thompson, TJ Sheffield, again, a kid that was committed to Notre Dame, right, Brian?
Yeah.
From the Nashville suburbs.
A few hours.
Yeah, for a few hours. I think they pulled their scholarship, but didn't keep it out on the table for TJ. Nonetheless, we kind of saw what he could do. We got flashes of it last year. So I think they've got some nice options. Talked about Tyrone Tracy. I tell you what, too, Brian, 2 young guys, Deion Burks, Belleville, Michigan, and your guy, Preston Terrell from Brownsburg. I tell you what, I think both those guys are going to be good. So don't forget about those guys. Zion Steptoe from Frisco, Texas, got here early. And talking to some coaches, they kind of liked what they saw from Zion. So they've got some nice options. I just pulled up some stuff I'd written for you for Marcus Washington. 6'2", 195, played 31 games for Texas, made 8 starts. Last year, Brian, he played in 12 games, had 7 starts, had 18 catches, 2 touchdowns. He leaves Austin with 25 catches in his career for 366 yards, 3 scores, and he's going to have 2 years of eligibility. He was in the class of 2019. So again, he certainly would be a nice addition and just amp up the competition level on the receiving unit, that even if Milton Wright doesn't play, there's going to be a lot of quality options and a lot of competition.
Right. Also not a bad thing to have Payne Durham to throw to.
Yeah,
Purdue also looking at Cole Brevard. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, from Carmel, as a defensive tackle. This is kind of a weird time for college coaches because you're not really 1,000% sure who's on your team, right? It's the end of the semester. The deadline for going in the portal and being eligible next year has passed, but that there is still a process where guys can get eligible right away via a waiver.
Yeah.
So you could still have some scholarship comings and goings right now, and that could depend on how much you can still go get. This is sort of, I think that the whole transfer cycle is weird, and probably a foreign deal to a lot of these coaches who aren't used to this sort of recruiting environment. But I think this is probably one of the weirder weeks, the end of your semester, where there's still guys out there and there's still guys leaving, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of guys out there, Brian. It's a matter on if you really want them or not, though. Talking to some people around the country the last few days, the quality of people in the portal is much higher, Brian, in December.
Yeah,
than it is after spring football. It's really kind of picked over at this point. The guys that have gone into the portal in the last month, right after spring ball, typically, Brian, those are the guys the coaches have sat down and had the conversation. They've had to talk, if you will.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian Neubert, we love you a lot, but you're welcome to stay, but you're not going to play.
In which case, I ask you to sign the runoff waiver.
So you got a decision to make.
Yeah.
That's what typically happens. And those are the guys pretty much jump in the portal for the most part. Not everybody, for the most part now.
Right.
And Purdue, like we know, Purdue's still looking. There's still good guys in there. Don't get me wrong. There's not as many of them. The competition obviously is very intense for the guys who are good. Defensive line, wide receiver, and don't forget about running back. Purdue's tried like heck to get a running back. We all know that, Brian. We kind of get tired of talking about it, and I'm sure the staff gets frustrated with it. They're not just going to take anybody. They're only going to take somebody if they could probably start, I'll be honest with you, or be darn good. You're going to have to probably be better than King DeRue. So there you go. That's the bar they're looking for. And I'm sure they can get by with what they've got. We talked about using Tyrone Tracy back there. But again, I'm sure that they would like to upgrade. But we'll see, like I said. But yeah, to your point, there are still some guys who could come on the roster here over the summer. And I think we could still see some Purdue Boilermakers maybe leave the team, Brian, not necessarily go in the portal, just maybe leave the team. I don't know. That's just something to keep on your radar. No big names, but maybe some little bit of roster movement there. So we'll see what happens on that front. Now, there's one last item to your initial point about May 1st deadline. Now, you do have to get a waiver if you come in the portal post May 1st, but grad transfers, Brian, they can still go unabated without a waiver. So if you graduate here in May, you can go play another year. You don't have to sit out. So there's still grad transfers you could have without guys having to get a waiver to do that.
Does that still apply if you've already transferred?
You can. I talked to someone about that yesterday. You could transfer twice in your career, not have to sit out once. You can use your one bullet, as an underclassman, transfer, play, stay there, graduate, transfer again as a grad transfer, not have to sit out. So you can do that twice.
Got boosters giving kids money. We've got kids transferring willy-nilly multiple times. It's just like the NCAA has just turned into everybody just do whatever you want.
It's just,
but we've been through that topic. The NCAA needed to get ahead of this. It did not. I will very quickly add a thing about the basketball transfer portal. Purdue obviously still looking for a point guard. Nigel Pack was bought by Miami. Kyle Lofton has committed to Florida. Jameer Young has committed to Maryland. Eric Hunter is off to Butler. Purdue now will wait until a bunch of guys pull out of the NBA draft here. So the way it is in basketball, you go in the portal, you go in the NBA draft. and then you pull out of the NBA draft, and then you deal with your portal hood. So Purdue will have to wait to see who comes out of the NBA draft here. I think I know they've got more irons in the fire than it probably seems like publicly. I doubt they're panicking nearly as much as Purdue fans are, but Purdue obviously has a very acute need there. Switching back to football, Tom, obviously, there were some eyebrows raised this week, and I don't think it necessarily was anything shocking, but Jeff Brohm was down in his native Louisville and surrounded by the media in his natural habitat. And he made some very, very complimentary comments about the Louisville job and very much left the door open for an eventual departure for Louisville. Now, I will say this right off the bat. When Jeff Brohm turned down Louisville in 2018, the circumstances were very different. And even then, I thought, and I wrote, that wasn't going to be his only chance at the Louisville job. And all along, I've thought one day he will be the coach at Louisville, because I think that is his destination job. I just think the timing in 2018 on both sides of this was not ideal. And to his credit, he made a business decision instead of an emotional decision. That was a very difficult decision for him to make, given all his family connections to Louisville and whatnot. But I do think at some point in time in his career, he will be the coach at Louisville. Whether that's soon, whether that's down the line, I have no idea. But Tom, what did you make of his comments about Louisville?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I think my sentiments are just like yours, Brian. I think it's probably not if, it's when Jeff Brohm is back in Derby City at his alma mater as the head coach. I think the poll was very strong from his family to go in 2018 or after that year. But again, you outlined what Jeff Brohm said there, the loyalty to Purdue, not feeling like it was right, to leave after just 2 years. Rondale Moore was just a freshman, coming off his freshman. George Karlaftis had committed.
David Bell had committed too.
David Bell. So, I give Brohm credit, because a lot of guys would have still bolted. And boy, the siren song of your alma mater in your hometown, that's hard. And if you got family tugging at you too, it's a lot to say no to, Brian. And he did, to his credit. And I think Jeff Brohm since then has really shown he can coach. He's earned his coaching chops in my mind. Last year says it all, I think. So now here we are with this most recent scenario you referenced. The quote I think I shared with you, we were just kind of talking about it, was from Jeff Brohm. He says, quote, "But obviously now we're on year 6. Yeah. So I love this town, this area. I'm an alumnus of Louisville, so anything can happen in the future," end quote. Again, he's being truthful. There's one thing you can probably always a lot of times say about Jeff Brohm is he's not going to blow a bunch of smoke up at you. And, we'll see what happens. We know he has contract extended at the board of trustees meeting in April, right? 2 years up to 2027. But here's the but, Brian. Buyout remains $1 million, right? Pretty manageable for anybody. So we'll see. Again, I guess I'll be honest with you. I would not be shocked, Brian, if Jeff Brohm leaves after this year, if Purdue does 7, 8, 9 wins. And of course, Scott Satterfield and that program continues to sort of scuttle along. You wrote, I think, about how they've kind of been trying to get rid of Satterfield.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of tumult at the top at Louisville with the president and the AD, the turnover there. So they haven't had a lot of good structure. They have a new basketball coach. So it just hasn't been a great environment to make a lot of big changes with so much, again, unrest at the top of your university athletic department. So, if the perfect storm happens, again, Brohm does well again, Louisville tanks, maybe that this is the time, this would be the opportunity after 6 years at West Lafayette that Brohm would leave. You know what? After 6 years, I don't think anybody could really begrudge it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 6 years is a long time. But, even after he turned them down in 2018, there have been still just obviously constant machinations going on. Is it machination or machination?
I say machination.
Yeah, there's been constant stuff still going on. The media still the media down there is still kind of negotiating on his behalf, pushing buttons, playing cards, whatever it might be. There's always a sports talk radio guy who knows something somehow. I don't know how that gets planted one way or another, but I do think that was not something that moved off the front burner when he turned them down in 2018. Obviously, Vince Tyre quit this past year from his job as AD there. That might have had something to do with the president not wanting to get rid of Scott Satterfield now and try to come after Brohm. But I do think if he leaves, whenever he may leave, Purdue has gotten a full term here.
Yep.
Had this been 2018 and you had just gotten your season tickets, kind of out of storage, so to speak, you got George Karlaftis, you got David Bell, you got most of a career from Rondell Moore. Obviously, the injury situation really hurt him. Purdue has gotten to where it wanted to go, back then, and it had no choice but to pay him and keep him back in 2018 because the alternative would have been, I don't want to say catastrophic, but you would have built up so much positive energy and then just had it torn all right back down by losing him so quick. Now, I think things are very different. And I think 6 years in coaching nowadays is a long time. And I think that day will come probably where he moves on, most likely to Louisville. It's just a matter of whether it's now or whether it's a few years from now, something like that. But I don't think he's going to be distracted. I don't think this is a situation where his mind's going to be on Louisville every hour of every day this year. But you're also in a tough spot too when you go to these situations because you have to play both sides of the fence here. You have to be nice to your alma mater, but you also have to be respectful of the situation you're in here. So there's really not a whole lot you can say where you can work both sides of that fence. That's what, when we put coaches in front of microphones and stuff, sometimes they're in situations where there is no right thing to say. And so it's not like he could have gone down to Louisville and been like, I have a lot of respect for Louisville. I love Louisville, but I love my job right now. So basically the inference there would be, so screw you, Louisville. I'm staying at Purdue or whatever. At the same time, you go down there and you kind of gush about Louisville, but that's all genuine because that's what Louisville means to him. That's what his home city means to him. That's what that program means to him. But then you make that comment at the end to kind of leave the door open, almost to suggest something is imminent. It's just a really tough position to be in. But I think we've covered everything about this topic there is to be covered. Now we'll just kind of see what happens here after this season or after the season after that, whenever it might be that they're able to get Scott Satterfield out of there, because it seems like there's enough forces against him that it's kind of a dead man walking.
6 years, Brian, only two coaches since Jack Malakoff have coached at least 6 years at Purdue.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea. Joe Tiller and Jim Coletto. That contract Brohm signed in 2018, while it seemed extravagant at the time, it's pretty much a bargain at this point with what's happened to salaries that quickly.
Right. And
going to the ACC, I know it's your alma mater. We all follow college football on a national level, Brian. We know what's going on. The ACC is not in a very good position right now. The money's not going to be in the ACC. And so that's, I think that's a factor to Jeff Brohm. The resources at a Big Ten school are out of sight, and they're only going to get more out of sight. Not the case in the ACC. So that's kind of an interesting factor too, with all those jobs in that conference.
Yeah, but there's a lot of money at Louisville. There's a lot
there is.
As people termed it back in 2018, a lot of horse and booze money. And there's also a certain prioritization of doing whatever it takes to win there. And
sports matter.
I think that support would be, he's been really well supported at Purdue. I mean, make no mistake about that. It's almost a blank check kind of situation in terms of what that program has needed, that they've gotten. as far as I can tell, best I can tell, at least in terms of the big stuff. I don't know about necessarily about all the minutia. I think the money's competitive. The facilities are good, stuff like that.
Getting
I
better
know football
too.
has relative autonomy to do what football feels like it needs to do. But at Louisville, there are no barriers to success. No barriers whatsoever. He would have the media on his side from day one. He would have the fan base on his side from day one, and it would be all set up for him. And then he would have to obviously produce. But I think it would be a situation very conducive to winning. We have talked more about Louisville football now here than we have Purdue football. So we're going to end the sports portion of this. And Tom, I think we've had some fun here the last couple of weeks. My bizarre rant last week about McDonald's ice cream machines being part of it. Alan always likes to have some humanizing banter at the end of these things to make us seem like we're actually good, engaging people. Whereas, people who know us might know there's two sides to every story. But what are you watching on TV right now?
Well, I'm watching a few things. I'm watching the Julia Child series on HBO Max. Yes, Julia Child, I admit it. So that's been fun. I'm watching The Flight Attendant season 2 with Kaylee Cuoco, I think her name is. That's the first, not as good as the first series, but
she's the girl from. I'm sorry, she's the woman from Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah, Big Bang Theory. So again, the first season was better, I thought. I'm watching something a little bit more offbeat on the Paramount Network called Texas 6. It's the second season of that, Brian. It's about a 6-man high school football team in Texas, a small town called Strawn, Strawn. A lot of fun, man. I just love it. Love the first season. I'm about 6 or 7 episodes into the second season. Not a lot of episodes, but just a lot of fun, man. The 6-man football, this communities down there. It's why I love high school sports. So I think maybe a lot of the viewers would enjoy that. Also started watching a series on Netflix on 3 Mile Island.
Oh,
and the disaster there. And my goodness, you're too young. That was happened before you were born, I think. But I was in middle school and I remember it. And it's right near Harrisburg too. So I remember being by it a couple of times.
I remember flying over it, going to Penn State a few times.
Yeah, because we were staying one time. I drove to Hershey, PA, so it's right down there. But anyway, it's been a kind of fun to get more detail on what went on at 3 Mile Island, how it happened, the process. They talked to so many people who lived in that area, so that's been an enjoyable show to watch too. I
am knee deep in We Own the City on HBO, and also Barry, the 3rd season of Barry. That show's an absolute trip, and
I got that on my list. Yeah,
Barry. That show is an absolute trip, and will kind of unsettle you at times. But NoHo Hank is the funniest character on television right now, as far as I'm concerned. Now that Peacemaker and Judo Master are off for the time being. Ozark.
Man, I love Ozark, Brian, but this last season, it's gone too long, and I have not started Better Call Saul yet. The conclusion of that, so that's on my.
I don't do prequels. I can't do prequels. I can't do shows. I can't do front end shows where I know what's happened to the character. I can't do it. I cannot do it because I love Mike Ehrmantraut, and I can't relive that. I spoiler alert. For anybody who hasn't watched Breaking Bad, but I just can't relive that. What was the other thing you said?
It was the last season of Ozark.
I was good with it. I just think there were so many things they had to tie up. It was just not an easy. It was not an easy thing, but that show was really, really good, and I think the time was probably right to wrap it up because it was getting to the point where it was like when Growing Pains or something, when the ratings would start to dip, they just add another kid, because they had nothing else to write. It's like you get to that place where you've taken every storyline as far as it can go, and you can't just layer new storylines on top of new storylines. So I thought it was a solid, logical ending to Ozark. I'm going to miss Ozark badly. I thought it was outstanding. I cannot believe Laura Linney hasn't won every Emmy there has been to win over the last couple of years, because I thought she was unbelievable. Jason Bateman was unbelievable.
about
Leah
Ruth?
Gardner was unbelievable. They were
Yeah.
all unbelievable. It was just a really well acted, really well written show. And I'm going to,
Marty.
yeah. So that's what we got, everybody.
Yeah, real quick too. We want to watch Severance on Apple Plus, and I liked Succession too on HBO Max, and that's it.
Succession's fantastic. That's the best show on television right now, I think. And it's not on television right now, but it is so good. For a show where it's not like a Sopranos, it's not like a Wire or anything like that, where characters like get killed or where there's action. It is for a dialogue driven show, and for things like that. It is fantastic. It is captivating. It was absolutely outstanding. HBO really doesn't miss very much, do they?
They don't. You're right.
So
concur.
Hopefully we didn't miss here. We probably miss far more than HBO does, but hopefully we were able to fill your 30 minutes of weekend time adequately. So for Tom Dienhart, I'm Brian Neubert, and on behalf of Alan Karpik, who's still sitting baking in the sun on the top of the Caesar's Palace, this has been your GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast, brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Union Club Hotel, home of the Boiler Up Bar and the 811 Bistro. Fantastic place, everybody. I'm serious. Really nice. So thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you'd be so kind as to like this, subscribe, whatever it is you're supposed to do on YouTube. I get confused between that and iTunes. Anything positive you can do, we appreciate it. Anything negative you might be inclined to do, just kind of hold off on that one. Give us another chance.
Hit our DM.
Right. Yep. See you, everybody.